Hello, everybody. What's up?
Oh, hello.
This is our November. That's the month. Yes. Okay. It is. This is our November Gothlet Club live show for. We're all wearing our shirt things. Also, sorry, I had like the other thing playing at the same time and it stressed me out. We're wearing our Gothlet Club t-shirts, not t-shirts, sweatshirts. Yes, we all have a different style of sweatshirt. So we got hoodies and we got a crew neck. We got all of it going on. So Gothlet Club actually does have like merch now. So if anyone's interested in that, the link to the merch is in the description of the video and all that good stuff. So I also have links in there to Taylor and Cecilia's channels. So you should definitely check them out. But we are going to be talking about The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor, and I forgot to look up how to pronounce his name. Lavalle?
Lavelle.
Okay. Laval. I keep wanting to pronounce it like with super French accent. I'm like, it's Victor Lavalle. It's like Laval. It sounds about right. So, hello, beautiful bookworm and Abby Latour. Nice to see y'all. I'm going to let y'all introduce yourselves. I guess if you want to go clockwise, we could do that. So, Cecilia, you can go first.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cecilia from Cecilia Reads. I make videos about books, of course, manga, comics. I read a lot of fantasy, horror, sci-fi, all of it. So, yes.
And I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor, and I read across the board, but as of right now, I've been mostly reading romance and classic books. So, yeah.
Nice. Ooh. I noticed that you've been reading like a lot of classics, Taylor, because I was like, this is great because I've been doing all the reading all the classic Gothic books recently, obviously. I mean, but I was like, look, there are more people that read these things, so I'm gonna start watching their stuff, a little bit more because at first I was kind of overlooking some of the classic stuff around BookTube, and so it's been nice to kind of see more of it because I found that I don't like some classics, but I like any that are in like the Victorian era, apparently. Like that's my jam.
Everyone's having fun and no one's having fun.
Yeah, it's like everyone's miserable, but also it's kind of cool. They're just vibing,
It's miserable, but aesthetic.
Yeah, it's just an aesthetic to it, so it works out. So I wanted to talk about before we like get into the meat. I know it's skinny, but there is meat here. Before we get into it, I kind of want to just ask, what was everyone's first impressions? I know this was my first read, but this was not Cecilia's first read. Was this Taylor? Was this your first read?
No, this is my second time reading.
Oh yeah, because you mentioned you'd read it in college. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I did.
Yes. Okay, so this is just my first read. But if you can take your minds back to when you first read it, what were your first impressions of it?
Okay. I remember I read it because it was available spontaneously, like through my Libby app. And I was like, I'll listen to the audiobook. And I was like coloring while I listened to the entire audiobook in one sitting, like at night. So it was like very ambient lighting. Like it was it was in the mood. And I was like, my entire Goodreads review rating of it or saying of it is literally just, this book was short, weird, and completely intriguing.
That's all we need. That's all we really need.
That's all I wrote. Like, and then I gave it a 4. I gave it a 4-star, and I was like, all right, that's all it needs. That's pretty much what it was. As I remember thinking, like, it was so interesting the way that it came out. And I didn't read the original, like, or the story it was based off from Lovecraft. So, but I hear it's very racist. Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, that's Lovecraft. So I'm not expecting anything else. But yeah,
no expectations.
No expectation, like very low, like below the ground. And it was just I just really liked it. So it was very interesting.
Yeah. I think I had a very similar experience. So I read it for an Afrofuturism and Afrofantasy class. So it was all science fiction and fantasy books written by Black authors, one of the best classes I've ever taken. And so we read this book, and obviously there was a lot of analysis and discussion, but this was also my first introduction to like Lovecraftian mythos. Outside of Scooby-Doo for some reason. And I was surprised by how much I liked it because it's not particularly a character-driven narrative, but it was creepy, but not too scary and just interesting and very short and sweet. And so I loved it back then. I love it again. So, yeah.
I think I had the same first impression as Cecilia, just saying it was short, weird, and cringe. So also, I kind of want to make that like my bio everywhere now. But I had a similar, like, I feel like Tor's like novella, they all have that kind of vibe to them. They're like weird, but they kind of capture you really quickly, and I really liked that. And so I wasn't entirely sure what to expect because I've had this freaking Lovecraft tome because I have an obsession with krakens, and I was like, I don't know if this is a kraken or a giant squid or Cthulhu, I don't know what it is, but it looked awesome, and so I was like, I'm gonna buy this. And then I learned about Lovecraft, and I was like, well, gonna maybe dive into that after we've read some of the other things. But I was excited. And also I'd read The City We Became. I read that like a couple of months ago. And since it's based off Lovecraft also, I was like, well, I loved that. Maybe I'll love this. So it was great. I didn't know what to expect, but I was also like, he has a guitar in his hand. That's exciting, I guess. So I didn't know what to expect, but I think it definitely surpassed my expectations anyway, just because when the book is short, I never know what to expect. So it was nice to do that. What was it like to reread it for y'all?
Ooh. At least for me, it was very like I kind of forgot a lot of what happened because last time I read it was in May. So it's been like, I don't want to count months. It's been like 5-6 months. And so when I was actually reading it, I was like, oh yeah, I was remembering these little aspects of it. But I also, I just really got to appreciate more of the writing because the first time I was more like, all right, let me get the plot. Let me get like everything that's happening. But the second time I was like, ooh, wow, look at that metaphor. Look at that like symbolism. Look at it was just like more eye-opening. It was more like in-depth, like the way that an English teacher would want you to read a book. That's how I read it the second time.
I feel like they want you to always read it twice.
True.
I think like this time, so the first time I read it, I was reading it and not really understanding a lot of the Lovecraftian mythos. So I had to wait until I got into class for my professor to like explain it to me. So reading it again with a little bit more of an understanding of Lovecraftian mythos and understanding post-discussion what is going on, I think I was also able to appreciate it a bit more. And it was also very handy because I had annotated the book when I was in college, so I didn't have to do that again.
That always works out better. I felt like that when I did when we read Mexican Gothic, I was like putting notes constantly, and it was so helpful. This one I wanted to, but I read it so like fast because I did it like yesterday and today. Because I read it so fast, I didn't like notate as much as I wanted to, because I have been behind on everything the past year. Slash 5 minutes. The whole year felt like 5 minutes, but you know. What did you feel about I'm just gonna go through like the characters and let us talk about like each of them. So the first one, I guess we'll just go with Tommy Tester himself. How did y'all feel? I wrote it down with all the characters so I don't forget their names. I'm terrible with names. How did y'all feel about him in general?
Yeah. I liked him. At least I remember at the beginning when I would like we was talking about that he was like really like pretty bad and like not bad at the guitar, but like mediocre and was like only able to play a couple songs. I'm like, oh, as a fellow mediocre musician, I appreciate that. And so I don't know why. I just like I felt like I was instantly able to relate to him. Which maybe is good or bad in a horror book, especially in this setting. But I just was really able to like attach to him, and then everything that he was feeling, just especially. I don't want to get into. I don't know if we're getting into spoilers this fast, but yeah, but especially like later in, it was just like I just felt everything he was feeling, and everything he did just made sense to me. So I was like, you know what, he just felt like a real character.
Yeah. That's something I really like about this book is that it's so small, but the sort of evolution of Tommy Tester into like Black Tom, it feels very organic and it feels like incredible. It's well paced and every decision makes sense. And it like they also made him very likable in the beginning. Like you understand what his motivations are and you know who's important to him, obviously his dad and so on. And I don't know. I think he's a really fantastic character who doesn't get a lot of page time per se. Like after the first half of the book, he's not really in it. But he very much stays in the book, and yeah, I love him.
Yeah, I definitely can see like all the decisions that he made, I could definitely understand, especially because we had that initial sort of dive into his mind and like how he did things. I think everything later makes sense, based on the situation and based on circumstances and, the social aspect of everything that's going on. I think that it makes sense, everything that he does. But no, it was weird. I didn't expect, I've read books where it switches like perspective halfway through, but it's always like jolting because I'm like, I wasn't ready to be over here in this guy's head. I've been in that person's head for so long. But it kind of felt like sudden at first. I was like kind of surprised how quickly he sort of changed and transformed, but it still made sense at the same time. But
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, and I definitely understand the musician thing. I thought it was interesting because usually you have these main characters who are always like super talented at things, and they catch people's eyes because they're so, I don't know, outside of what is normal and mediocre. But he was, still mediocre, which I thought was interesting because this guy like sort of singles him out. Whatever the guy's name, I can't.
Suydam? Suydam?
How do you pronounce it? Suydam?
I'm so bad at that. And I listen to the audio. No.
I listened to the audiobook and it sounded like Suydam.
Suydam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like this guy picks him out of, however many people he could pick, and he picks this guy out and singles him out. Even though he kind of portrays himself as this average guy, other people don't seem to see him as average. Even the police at one point, they're like, called him that he's not simple. He's like, you're not simple or whatever. So it seems like people can see past his sort of average acting exterior, even though he's putting that forward, But that was interesting. Let me see. What about Otis, the dad?
Oh.
No, don't make me think about Otis.
Otis made me angry. Not Otis the character, but what happened to him made me angry.
Yeah.
Like which is understandable. I think what do you think the purpose of it was? What happened to him in the book?
I think it serves as a catalyst, one, for Tommy Tester to become Black Tom, but I feel like Black Tom also feels like a sort of representation of like Black anger, and the senseless killing of Tom's dad is kind of like that catalyst for all of that Black anger. It's just someone minding their own business in their own home getting murdered,
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like especially like the way how he died in such a aggravating way. Also, it was just kind of like of course, just like social commentary, especially, I don't know why when I read it in May and then everything that happened and then I reread it again and I was like, oh, like it just wow, I can't speak. Like felt really real, especially just the way it's like, yeah, he was shot in his house and it was like, oh, it was self-defense, but we're like, no, it wasn't. And it was just so aggravating.
Yeah.
The fact that the police officer like shot him and then reloaded the gun and continued shooting, like, that made me so angry.
And it's not even like, like modern guns, like you just like pop in another thing. It was a revolver. Those things, I have a revolver. It takes time to reload those things. Like I was in fear for my life.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and he was shot like 6 times too. So it's like you had to reload that.
It's like, and then he like is still like in fear as he's reloading. It's like it doesn't make any sense. And I think that was definitely like a catalyst. It was like the origin story almost for Tommy Tester into Black Tom. And then also I thought it was interesting that he thought he was holding a rifle, but he was holding a guitar. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I thought it was interesting that later music becomes a way for him to kind of gain power. And it was almost like music was weaponized in that moment or used as self-defense or looked like a weapon to him, which is interesting because also the way music, cultural, like music that is significant to a culture can be viewed as, hostile by people outside that culture at times.
True.
Like even just like rap, like with my patients, since I'm a music therapist, I'll have these people that'll choose these country songs and then they'll say, I like everything but rap. And I'm like, okay, so why is that? And I always challenge these things. They're like, this is about drugs and sex. And I was like, and we just listened to a song where they're talking about drinking and sex. So is that really what's upsetting to you? And so just, I don't know if that was a purposeful thing, but them thinking that the guitar was a weapon to me also made me think of the fact that music can be viewed in such a, hostile way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in the 1920s, when I feel like jazz was what was kind of considered to be like evil or, a bad influence.
Yeah. And now it's like mostly studied by old white men.
Yeah.
Like, let's appropriate everything. Let's just go and take that. And, we're going to say it's bad, but then we're going to like it and take it over, So that was interesting to me. Yeah. What about, however they say this guy's Suydam? I think that's how you pronounce it, according to the audiobook. Suydam.
Oh, yeah.
How y'all feel about that guy, or what would you think his purpose was in the overall story?
I mean, I feel like at the beginning, I was just like scared. I was like, "Ooh, something's gonna happen." Like the first time we met him, I was like, "Ooh, he's gonna try to kill you. Like, what's gonna happen here?" And I was like, really scared. I don't know. I was just scared for Tom. And then like I feel like a lot of his role was to kind of like bring Tom, like pretty much get Tom ready for him to turn into Black Tom. Because if they had not met, the rest of the book would not have happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like just their meeting was kind of like, oh, here I'm going to help you, like meet you and just show you like this kind of part of the world that you had not known before. It felt like they're like Latin, I will show you. Very much so, kind of like a guide, and then the betrayal later. Just
yeah. I feel like referring to Suydam as like a false ally, like he's definitely not even close to allyship, but the fact that he keeps telling Tom like, oh, I'm going to lift your people out of squalor and so on, like I'm doing this to help you, like he's clearly not, but I feel like he has a sort of false allyship about him. But I also feel like even Tommy Tester sees right through him, so he's not good at being a false ally,
not at
or
all.
performative ally.
Yeah. No, I kind of got that vibe. When he was inviting him to the party, I've watched Purge too many times, I think, that I was like, don't you go to this party of people. They're dangerous. Don't do it. These white men are dangerous. And I was like ready for something bad to happen. And it did, but it was not in the way I was expecting. You know? And he definitely had that false allyship vibe. And then talking about, there's this cloud of ignorance over y'all. I'm going to show you the light. I'm going to lead you to enlightenment or whatever. And it's like he was collecting people of color almost at his little party and thing. And it's almost like he viewed them as tools to be used rather than as people. And then it's almost like I know your people better than you know your people. Kind of like, how men like to be like, well, I know the woman's body is better than they do. Like, I don't know if y'all have met those kind of guys before, but yeah, those kind of guys. And is the closest I can conceptualize to that, which is not the same, but that's, I don't get the idea of like, I can show you something that none of you can see because you're down over here and I'm over here. So, I wasn't like sad about his fate there at all. I was like, well,
exactly.
I will also say it's very interesting that he chose to take up a bunch of tenement buildings in Red Hook that were like for a bunch of for immigrants and people of color. I'm sure there's something significant in that, like just, I guess, what's it called when people move in? Gentrification, maybe. Gentrification.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what reminded me. That's another thing that reminded me of the city we became, because it was like the Brookstones. Is that what they're called? Brownstones.
Probably brownstones.
They were like really significant in the story as being something that was so inherently like part of the city and part of the borough. And just when those were being taken over, it was really significant. And I thought that was mirrored in this as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and he gave me a lot of vibes of like a cult leader.
Yeah.
Like, especially, I just watched a couple days ago, I watched a documentary about like cults. I don't know how that happened, but there was a specific episode about like Jim Jones and that whole situation, and there the
Yeah.
parallels between them scared me. It was just like, I don't like, a lot of the tactics that Jim Jones used is also the same tactics that he used, and it was so weird. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that was inspiration or if that was just an accident, but it was crazy.
It was definitely obvious that like they studied, like Victor Laval studied like something to do with like cult leaders or even just people that radicalize, groups, because he like singles out somebody, he makes them feel, individual and special, but he's done this obviously multiple times, and it almost makes me wonder like did he have those like secret one-on-one meetings with like some of the other people that he invited or not, That just makes me curious about that.
Yeah.
What about, let's do Howard first. Of the two cops, Howard, it described him and Malone as being the number 10, because one was like really skinny and one was rounder. And for some reason, I've seen this in so many books where that has been like the case of these two bad guys, like in Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I have it right here. Neverwhere. Like there are these two guys, and like one is like really scrawny and one's like a big dude, and they're like the evil pursuers of whoever. And so that reminded me of that. But Howard, it seems like, I mean, he's obviously the worst human ever. But we need, like Rena just said in here, that he is such a hate character. I think that is so accurate. Like I feel like every book needs a character that you can just hate without any, he doesn't get a point of view. He doesn't get any, like, I don't know, even like Malone, you get part of his like mindset. Like you're given that on the page. Doesn't mean you have to, actually empathize with him at all, but he's given like a chance to, I don't know, explain himself, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
By getting that point of view, and Howard doesn't even get that, so it's obviously he's meant to be despised 100%.
Yeah, and it really works because I hate that guy.
Absolutely. I would burn him, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he died in the end, I was like, oh no.
Such a shame.
Oh God, no.
Wow,
Like,
fake tear, like
get your eye drops.
get eye drops.
How dare.
Exactly.
Like, Tom is so evil. How
Oh no! Wow, he did such a bad thing.
Anyway. So he doesn't really require. I don't feel like. I think he's supposed to be the type that you view him and you notice that he's blatantly evil. Like he's blatantly. Whereas the others in here hide it under different things. Malone doesn't hide it well at all. But like, for example, the Suydam, he hides it, under his fake allyship. But it seems like Howard, did I get his name right? Howard is just like the type that's very obviously evil. There's different levels of terrible people. He's the one that's just completely blatantly, you can't really look at it from an angle where he doesn't look evil.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think it's like what I like about this book is that you have the different levels of, I guess, racism in it. You've got your performative allyship, your sort of indifferent or centrist or moderate like person who's just sort of indifferent to the whole racism thing, and then you've got Howard, who's the worst.
And then you got Howard,
the Howards of the world. God, no, I think that's a really good point. It's almost like he sets like that baseline. It's like, well, he's not like as bad as this guy, but no.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I'm not as bad as Howard. I mean, you kind of like you're bad in a different way.
Just it doesn't mean it's less bad. It's just a different type of bad. There was also, I had this quote that, since you mentioned the indifference, there was one quote that was, "What is indifference compared to malice?" I believe was the quote. Yeah, what was indifference compared to malice? I can't remember where that was in the book, but it stood out to me because, we talk about indifference when it comes to racism or when it comes to, any sort of hatred of a marginalized group. we talk about, indifference is just as bad as straight up malice.
Mhm.
And that's definitely evident in this book, because he doesn't do anything to stop Howard. Like, Malone never does anything to actually stop Howard, or I guess prevent him from being the full evil that he is. So, what do y'all think about that quote? What was indifference compared to malice?
I would say, because like I feel like at least a lot of times where it's like if you are complete, like especially in terms of like in other topics, like a lot of times you hear this like in cases like of bullying and stuff like that, where it's like if you watch something happen and you don't do anything about it, you're just as bad as the people actually doing it. So
Yeah.
when it says something like that, like indifference compared to malice, it's like, yeah, you're not physically doing it, but you're okay with it happening, and that's
Yeah.
just as bad. So pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, because it's, even if you're like, oh, I wasn't okay with it happening, well, then why did you not attempt to
Stop
I
it.
guess stop it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are so many instances of that happening with like Malone, where I mean, one, there's like the part where Howard kills Tommy Tester's brother, and Malone just sort of sits there and is like, sucks.
Yeah.
Tough luck, buddy.
Yeah.
And then you've got like, there's this part where Malone is like interviewing this woman about the events going on at like Ma At's home, and the woman is like being super racist and so on. And like, I feel like Malone knows it's wrong, but he's not going to say anything or do anything, and he sort of like encourages her.
Yeah. I think Beautiful Bookworm said, no, he actually takes up for him and his character. So I'm guessing that you're saying that Malone took up for Tommy and his character at some point. So it's almost like, was that enough though?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When there were other things that could be, we don't want to reward like someone doing like the bare minimum. Sometimes, there's way more that could have been done at times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that, I mean, obviously taking up for someone's better than not taking up for them. But then there's other, you want to do a little bit more than just that. So since we are on the topic of Malone and kind of discussing him, I was gonna say, how did y'all feel about when it switched to his perspective, like in the book?
Yeah. I was like scared at first because I was like, oh, are they about to try to redeem him? Like, what is this? What is happening here? Like, because I was like, I'm not here for redemption. I'm not. So I was a little wary at first from the first time I read it, but then as I got on, I was like, okay, I'm understanding why his perspective is here. And of course, like the second time around, I'm like, yeah. After knowing like what happened to him at the end, it was a lot easier to read, I guess, on the second time, or at least it didn't faze me as much on the second time.
Yeah. And I do sort of like that we switch from, Tommy's point of view to Malone's, because Malone is also sort of unraveling this mystery about Black Tom and what's going on with Robert Suydam, and you sort of get his perspective on everything that happened, but you're also seeing, I guess, sort of where he comes from in terms of all of like the racism, walking around predominantly immigrant neighborhoods and
yeah. And that was also interesting that it differentiated between the legal immigrants, and it mentioned, I think, German, Irish, Jewish, and I think some Chinese immigrants, I think it mentioned, but it differentiated between the legal and the illegal immigrants. And I thought that was, again, very reminiscent of like how we, how news and media and people kind of differentiate now. It's like, well, what's the difference, Oh, see, we specify when he took up for Howard. Okay. Oh, okay. Got you. I understand.
Yeah.
He's been compliant is what I was getting at. Thank you for clarifying, because I was. It's always hard when it's like just him and his, because you don't know which character. So thank you for clarifying with that. Let's see. Abby says, I thought the perspective switch was pretty interesting, but it almost made me want the perspective from Suydam's perspective. That was hard for me to say, but no, I totally get that. I think Taylor's
oh, sorry, I had to turn on the lights because things were getting very dark in my room.
You're good.
You're good.
There we go.
And I think that this was a good point too. Like I really wanted a perspective from him as well. But then I was also like, I felt like it would show me too much because I think it added some mystery not to fully know what was in his head. But I definitely felt that urge to have that perspective. So he was also watching Red Hooks in a really uncomfortable way. Like, oh, I'm part of that neighborhood, but watch and judge them. Thinking of Malone, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he's a police officer who's always like looking for like illegal immigrants and so on, like he's not one of them. He's actively working against the people there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was that one part where I think it was Tommy was like, "Are you going to protect me then?" At one point, I think he was asking them if they were going to protect him if that lady decided to come after him, and they were like, "Well, not everyone's scared of guns," or something like that. And I was like, "Well, but like I would be if it was pointed at me."
Yeah, exactly. Like, wouldn't
like,
most people?
I mean, it's like I just use them maybe to protect me, maybe do your job. But the fact that he even said that was like, I was just glad he said something because it seemed like at one point he was just kind of, I know he was very calculating and like how he held his shoulders, how he walked, how he spoke, out of like self-defense, like a defense mechanism. And that when he was grabbed by the guy, he mentioned that it let his sort of facade slip a little bit. And then the fact that he was even able to say like, well, aren't you going to protect me? I was glad he said it because it seemed like to that point he was biting his tongue at every moment because he kind of had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Ooh, what's this? Okay. It is my lack of Cthulhu mythos knowledge, but the magic here comes from immigrant culture with Tom's mother and the people at the club, etc. And he studies that for himself, where I'm wrong. Ooh, so what do we think about that?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Especially since music is a big part of Tommy Tester's like magic or Black Tom's magic. And one that was passed on from his parents, but to, a sort of, I feel like music is a very important part of Black culture as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like in studying, like just in my studies, like my music therapy studies and my psychology of music, like classes that I had to take for my degree and stuff, it was so interesting because it almost is like culture is so tied to music, like with religion as well, or with, everything. Like culture is so, intrinsic to music is so intrinsic to culture. Yeah, there. And like same, vice versa, music is usually created out of culture, but then culture is so tied to music that they're just so closely related that I love the idea of any time I see like music magic, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. This is gorgeous. This is great, because it can feel like magic also when you're making music or when you're sharing music with somebody. Or when it's, something that is so tied to your culture or your beliefs or a group of people that you're part of, it can be so, I don't know, there's a lot to it. There's something called entrainment. And that's like when, for example, if you're listening to something and then your breathing kind of goes into time with that, or if your heartbeat sort of kind of syncs up with the rhythm that you're listening to. I noticed this a lot when I worked in NICU because you could see the monitors for their breathing and their stuff, and I'd play my little ukulele and sing, and you could see it sync up with your music. And
Whoa.
so, yeah, it's the coolest thing ever. And so we would help it when their oxygen levels were low. We would kind of start where they're at and speed up a little bit. Or if they were, breathing too quickly, we'd start there and like slow it down a little bit. And the thing is, when you're with a group of people and you're all engaging in the same music, it's almost like everybody's doing that and training to the music. So it's like everyone's kind of moving together and breathing together and all that kind of stuff. And there is a magic to it. Even though we can describe it with science now, there is magic to it. And so it's so cool for me to see like that kind of stuff in there. But
yeah, it's really interesting, especially because at least like a couple of years ago, my freshman year, I took a class called the History of Jazz, where we learned like the history of jazz, which was really interesting, especially reading this book because jazz, like specifically jazz music, is such like a big part of this book, and especially since we learned a lot about the Harlem Renaissance, and since this book takes place like during the Harlem Renaissance, like in Harlem, a lot of just like, of course, the history of jazz is tied to Black culture, and there's specific strains, like types of jazz that are just specifically towards to one specific part of someone's culture. So by like seeing that in here, it's really, at least for me, it was just really nice to see, but also it just like, oh, I totally lost my train of thought. But pretty much like, I was really interesting to see that, at least like you were able to see just, well, specifically with the immigrants that were shown in the book, how they were kind of all tied together in this kind of way.
Mhm.
It was just cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is so cool to hear like the different types of jazz, like New Orleans jazz
Oh yeah.
is like one of my favorite, like, and also like big band. Those are, jazz is so wide. Like there's so many different types. Like I went to like a classical school. My husband went to a jazz school. They're like neighbors, but like the two schools were neighbors, but it's very different. Like the programs and how they do things are so different. Because jazz is so full of improvisation and like it's always going to be different, which makes it feel very alive. Which is so it's super cool the way that that's done in the book and stuff. But yeah. All right, I had another question. Let me pull it up here. Oh, so I was going to discuss how he, like I mentioned it for a second, but how he kind of changes himself to fit into spaces that don't seem to be built for him, or kind of made for him. And I thought that was interesting how he did that, because transformation is also kind of a big part of his life, or a big part of his kind of overall arc. But like, what were some of the things that he did to sort of fit into the white spaces that were, or at least how they were described in the book?
Oh yeah.
Well, early on, he talks about, or there's this paragraph that says, when he dressed in those frayed clothes and played at the blues man or the jazz man or even the docile Negro, he knew the role bestowed a kind of power upon him. Give people what they expect and you can take from them all you need. They won't realize you've juiced them until they're dry. And I do like that there is that little bit of, I guess, sort of, he's finding power where he can, and he's finding power in playing this sort of roles of like, being docile or being like the music guy or music black guy or whatever, and using it to hustle and sort of, trick people. So.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that also kind of reflects how we still, sometimes the people that we accept, like Beyonce, for example, how everybody was talking about after Lemonade came out, they were like, there's even an SNL skit about, they're like, Beyonce's black?
Hot sauce in my bag swag? What does that mean?
What does that mean? And like, even with that, it seems like that the society in general is more accepting of black artists than people that aren't famous, and even then it's when they make themselves palatable to the white ear, the white eye, almost, and so I liked the way that was done in there, and how it was like a character that he was playing.
Yeah, definitely.
And let's see, where else? I'm like looking at my notes, and I wrote them in cursive, and I regret writing them in cursive.
Not in cursive.
My hands are so like sensitive that like I'm just writing cursive because I'm like, I don't want to lift my hands, my wrist hurts.
Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting how he did it was like at the beginning how he almost had this sort of acceptance of just the way things were. It's like, okay, they're gonna look at me this time, they're gonna question me at this time, it's not safe after dark. And just kind of an acceptance of this is just how it is. And I thought it was interesting how much different that is from now, where there's a little bit more power in speaking up, or like, saying what you got to say. And I think it's nice to see that is, I guess there's more power in speaking up nowadays.
Yeah.
Not always, but
yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that a lot of times, sometimes in the older generation, where it's like, why would you speak up on this? Because a lot of times they still have the mentality of like when they were younger and like back in the day, like, don't speak up about this, like, don't say anything, don't do anything to aggravate. Well, now we're just like, I'm gonna aggravate as much as I can. Like, that is my goal. I'm here to make people uncomfortable. Like, it's just a big shift over just the last like couple decades.
Yeah. And part of it is, I feel like the internet gives people more of a platform, both, to do great things and to do terrible things. But, it's a little bit safer to speak your mind when you're on Twitter because, most people don't know where I live. So
Mm-hmm.
True.
Absolutely.
I
It's
think
almost like
a general, I guess, moral shift. It's like
Mhm.
in the 20s, it was okay to be racist. Now in 2020, it's not okay to be racist. And of course, it would be very different if like people said like the N-word on Twitter and if nobody said anything or nobody cared, it would be completely different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
There's more pushback against those behaviors, which is good to see, and it does take a whole community to push back rather than just a couple of people, because it's like, oh, if only one person has a problem with it, then I'm good to say it. But if like a whole community has a problem with it, then there's more power in that almost.
Yeah,
So that's good to see.
definitely.
Let's see. What was my other question? Oh, okay. So I wrote down like many of the books that we kind of consider classics are obviously like by old dead white men. The majority of like books that we consider like Western classics. So it was nice to see how this recentered a character of color and gave them like a voice. Do y'all think that it succeeded in doing that? Or why do you think that it succeeded in doing that?
I think it did. I think it was a really great. First of all, it has all of the things you like in classic books, which are like symbolism, metaphors, allegories, everything. The gang's all here. But I think it did a really good job in centering, I think, a Black voice, even if for half of the book it wasn't from the perspective of a Black man. I think that's because the beginning is just so powerful, where you understand like how Charles or Tommy Tester gets around in the world, how his life is sort of torn apart by systemic racism, and how that anger allows him to transform into Black Tom and do these things that we would consider terrible, but it's Black anger. It's Black sort of, I guess, retribution or something.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it definitely succeeded. Specifically just like with the topics that the book chose to talk about, but not in a very, I guess, not overt way, but not very like a writing down this is bad and blah 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 kind of thing. Right? It was more like nuanced and just like black and white. Like, yeah, Black Tom did some bad things, but it's understandable why he did those bad things. And kind of like, if you were in that kind of anger and all this kind of happened, you might do those things as well. Kind of thing where it was just kind of like
just maybe.
You know what I mean? Like. Who knows, but again, it's like, I don't know. I'm not in that situation.
Yeah.
So it kind of explores where it's like, what if like this happened and more, I guess not in like kind of a more magical sense. Like if you had magical powers and this happened to you, this kind of thing would happen.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of classics, this isn't an easy book to read. Like it's a fast read and it's really digestible, but to understand all of the deeper layers in it, it's not particularly easy. You have to go through it like several times sometimes to understand everything. Like there were things I didn't pick up on this time around.
My little brother's here. I'm sorry. He's being a mess. But I agree. I think that it was nice that it kind of gave you perspective and it gave you that one-on-one. He's a mess. Okay, he's gonna hide under the desk now.
Cool.
Oh, okay, he's getting my footrest from under the desk. I have this giant banana under my desk.
Aw.
That I use as my footrest. I'm giving up. Hold up. I'm talking to people, friend. Okay. So, yes, what I'm going to get you. You just better watch yourself. What genre do y'all think that you would sort of classify this under, subgenre wise? Obviously, it's like a fantasy, but what other genres would you put it under?
Ooh.
Horror, definitely.
Horror?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's scary. There's some terrifying like imagery in this book.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I can imagine if this was a movie, like I could just imagine the movie trailer they would make for this.
Oh
It
yeah.
would be one of those trailers that like it will come on and I immediately need to change the channel or something because
Yeah.
it's too scary. The imagery would just creep me out.
Yeah. The imagery around Ma At was especially terrifying. Like
Yes.
the idea that you see her in her doorway, but you can tell, but you're not sure that there's more of her. Like
Yeah.
that's so scary.
It
And
gave me like Baba Yaga vibes. I don't know why.
Yes. That's what I was thinking
Okay,
of.
yeah.
And I almost wanted to pronounce like her. Wait, what was it? Ma'at? Is that how you pronounced it?
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that she immediately was like when it mentioned the book like catching on fire, almost as she pulled it inside. I was like, it's almost like she's consuming it really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I have very staticky hair now that I've been beaten to death with banana.
There was this other scene where when Tommy I think first meets Suydam and he sits down and Tommy realizes that there's something up with his legs, like it doesn't reach the floor and then his legs just sort of grow.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so weird.
I was like, what is it?
And the way that they described his disgust at that too, I was like, yeah, I would have been freaked out.
Yeah, I'll be like,
buddy.
My dude, there's something going on there.
exactly. I feel like this would be an amazing movie though.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would, ooh. It would be a Jordan Peele, come on, let's go.
I was literally going to say, Jordan Peele, get on this.
Please get on this.
And it needs to be a movie, not a series.
Yeah, no,
not like a
I feel
mini
like-
series. Like no movie.
It's a novella. It shouldn't be longer than. Or it should be like a movie.
Yeah. Maybe like a 3-part miniseries. Maybe.
And that would be okay, I think, but
Yeah,
not like
I
a
think that would-
whole.
Yeah.
But nothing more than like a 3-hour time.
Yeah, no, it was good. And also the word outside was interesting because he mentioned it being like his house being on the outside or the door being like it kind of Suydam's house being on the outside and it had it in italics outside.
Yeah.
And then at one point someone said the word outside and Malone like repeated the word outside and it was in italics again and I was like, look at this. This is interesting. It was very interesting. Because especially with the othering of people in this, you know.
Yeah.
You know, it almost seems like are you putting them outside or are you outside or yeah. Ooh, the eyelid thing. Abby brought the eyelid thing.
Yes.
That's like my favorite, like, I guess, not part in the book, but favorite, I guess, sort of point in it. Like, I don't know. The whole, obviously, it's a sort of get woke reference.
Yeah. We'll just cut your dang eyelids off and you'll see.
Yeah, I remember reading that part and I was like, your eye, oh, imagine how weird that, I don't know. That's so weird.
I'm pretty sure it works like a snake, Rena. Like, I'm pretty sure I really wondered how sleep works for him now. I'm just pretty sure it's like a snake situation.
Ooh.
I feel like he just put like a sleep mask on in like darkness. Like I just assumed it was just like he just had like one of those like namaste kind of like on his eyes and like
one of the ones that's got like the actual drawn eyelids like closed.
Yeah, it's like those with the little eyelashes. Like I could.
We all want what we can't have.
Yeah, I can imagine him just wearing that, and then that's how he would sleep. Because like that's the only thing that would make sense to me.
Yeah,
it's like that's how he would sleep. He had to wear like a blindfold or something, so he can actually not close his eyes, of course, but have some darkness.
Yeah. I found like 2 passages there that in the book that talk about that. Not the I guess sleeping without the eyelids.
Sort of. Victor Lavelle, I need you to answer this in an interview. No.
I mean, I do touch my eyeballs when I put in contacts. It's actually not that bad.
I feel like it's touching
great to it.
Just, I don't know.
Like, not that I do it recreationally, but like, you know, it's not that bad.
Just for fun, you know.
It's really cute. But you know, at some point the book says, Black Tom had cut off Malone's eyelids. Try to shut them now, Black Tom said. You can't choose blindness when it suits you. Not anymore.
Oh, that's such a good.
I want that like on a poster.
Yeah.
you say a coaster?
A poster. Yeah.
Poster. I was like, a coaster.
Like a
No, a
coaster.
poster, not a coaster. I mean,
Put my drink on that.
that would be cute. Yeah, put my drink on that. Blindness. That'd be a cute coaster. I would do it. New merch. No.
New merch. No, I love that you can't choose blindness when it suits you. And it's like now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and then there's also the one that said something about the wealthy can remake reality to their liking or something.
Oh yeah.
What was that? But a wealthy man's reality is remade at will. That was interesting also because I feel like classism isn't talked about as much as it could be as it applies to other
Mhm.
areas, you know,
Yeah.
and people that, the whole eat the rich thing, but like the rich can really, control what their reality is. Like they have a lot of influence and sometimes they don't use it the way that they could, but they have a lot of influence.
Mhm.
Even just simple things that they take for granted can change people's lives, you know.
Yeah.
True.
The things you see the rich people get away with that, middle class or, lower class people could never. Like they might be in jail for life or something that a rich person could get away with so easy. And so that was an interesting quote as well to sort of see in there. But
True.
yeah. Go ahead. Were you gonna say something? No, okay. I thought somebody was going to. I was like, Rita said there are so many powerful statements in there. There were a lot of great, like just looking at I like to go on the Goodreads section that just says quotes and just like seeing all the ones in there in one place, which was great. But I think those were all the questions specifically I had. Do y'all have any other points that y'all wanted to bring up or discuss from the book? I can think of.
I think we got everything, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I thought so. I think we covered, I'll probably think of more stuff later because that's just how that works. But yeah, I overall gave it 5 stars. I don't think I actually put it into Goodreads yet, but in my brain it's 5 stars.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
It was good. It was really good. But thank you both for being on and talking about it with me and everything. Feel free to come back at any time and do any other live shows in the future. Next month we are reading A Christmas Carol. I don't have an individual. It's just in this giant compendium of Christmas books. But we're reading A Christmas Carol next month because who doesn't love ghosts in December?
True.
So that's what we're doing next month. Don't forget we have merch in the description. It's linked in the description and everything. And if you keep an eye on our Gothlit Club Twitter, you can get more updates about when show or when books are being chosen and things like that. I try to put them on the community tab as well and on YouTube, but I don't always remember to do so, but I'm trying to. But yes, Christmas Carol next month. Go and follow and subscribe to Cecilia and Taylor because they're awesome. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else, but that's all. Like this stream if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to let out the breath you didn't know you were holding.